Episode 64, How to Deal with ADHD as an LDS Woman with Jody Long.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, the podcast where each episode is a conversation between me, Heather Rackham, and one of my amazing coach colleagues. Each coach here is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and certified through the Life Coach School. Together, we have one main goal, helping you live your best life no matter what. You ready for this conversation with the coach? Here we go.
When many think of someone who has ADHD, they think of hyper, overactive little boys. While that definitely can be a symptom, for many girls and women, the hyperactivity is in their brains and therefore often goes unrecognized and undiagnosed. Coach Jody Long was not diagnosed with ADHD until she was 35. With that diagnosis, the way she had been all growing up started to make sense. She now helps other women with ADHD come to peace with their diagnosis, as well as realize it's one of their greatest superpowers. If you have ADHD or think you might, you will definitely come away with a feeling of hope after listening to this episode.
Today, I am joined by Coach Jody Long and thrilled to have this conversation. We've spent a few minutes kind of laughing and chuckling before we started this and how lucky our kids are that they have life coaches for parents, because we can direct them in so many ways, whether they want to or not. But
True.
Anyway, I'm excited for you guys to meet her today. So Jody, would you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you, how you came into coaching, all of those things.
Yeah, totally. I'm psyched to be here. Just kind of the logisticals. I was raised in small town Indiana. I live in Columbus, Ohio right now. We love Columbus. It's a great place. People come here for schooling. So if you're debating something like that, come on over. We love Columbus. I have a husband who's a psychiatrist at the VA, and I have 3 kids, a daughter who's 17, a son who's 15, and a son that's 11. And I love being their mom. I graduated from Utah State University with a degree in PR and kind of moved all over the country a bit for my husband's medical schooling. And we've been here 7 years now. Regarding coaching, how I came into it, I was like at this really difficult point in my life where my husband was in residency and we had 3 kids. And I had this job with a difficult boss, and I was young women's president with a lot of young women that had some high needs, and I loved them dearly. So I was very involved. And all of a sudden I just started getting really sick, virus after virus. I went from running half marathons to not being able to get out of bed, seriously. And at first they thought it was like MS and all these things. It was a really scary time. I'd never been sick before. And I was just doing what I thought was right, and they broke. And I kept thinking, how can I try to do what's right? I'm doing everything I can, and I broke. And my therapist friend, Jenny, hi, Jenny, she said, you should listen to this coach, Jody Moore. She's a life coach. And she's like, I know, life coach sounds like woo-woo and weird, but seriously, just listen. And so I listened, and it really piqued my curiosity and helped me realize, like, why is this not being, is there not someone on every street corner with a bullhorn saying, hey, your thoughts create your emotions and all of these things? And I believe we should have been taught these things straight out of the womb. So anyway, I focused on my own development first. And I think that's really important. And what's so powerful about life coaching is like, you have been transformed. And that's what's hard to market when you're going out there and you're like, I'm a life coach. And it helped me. And you imagine people thinking, okay, yeah, right. But really, it helped me get through the hardest time of my life. And it's taught me things I will never be the same. That's what this is about. Adult development. We need that for the rest of our lives. And we can't have that unless we know how our brain works. So that's how I came to it. Most importantly, I'm a crime junkie. So that's something else about me. Love crime podcasts, British and foreign crime shows, crime novels. That sounds like I have a problem, but
No.
I love it. And I love crossword puzzles and warm brownies with ice cream. And I'm a really loud laugher and a hugger and pretty goofy. And I have depression and ADHD. There's a little bit about me.
I like how you just slipped that in down there.
Yeah, right. The segue.
Yeah. Well, I'm handing you the bullhorn when you're like, everyone should be staying in a corner. There should be someone with bullhorns. That's what I love to do. That's why I love doing this podcast, is I feel like I'm giving so many people a bullhorn to
Perfect.
and tell how these tools are changing lives. And I'm with you. These should be taught from the very beginning. And we were laughing before because Jody said, my kids think I can turn everything from a chicken nugget into a life coaching.
Yeah, even
tool.
a chicken nugget. It's an object lesson.
Yes.
They're
And
so annoyed.
yeah, lucky you, your kids get you and a psychiatrist father. Like they are.
Someday I hope they think they're lucky. Yeah, for sure.
They will. They will. Okay, so you have depression, ADHD. Does that play a part in the people that you work with, the people that you choose to coach?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a general life coach for women.
Okay.
And often they're members of this church, but it doesn't have to be. You know, I wasn't raised in a place where I was pretty much the only member of the church. So I'm comfortable with a lot of people. But just little by little, you know, organically, I've started working more with women with ADHD because they want someone who really understands what they're going through. So I have a mix of people, but yeah, I'd say about half women with ADHD or who think they have it or who feel like they have a busy brain. They can't really fully explain it. They say it something along the lines of my brain never leaves me alone. I do not know what peace feels like in my head. So
yeah, I think I would describe myself as one of those people.
I think a lot of women would, for sure.
I think so too. So I was laughing. My mom and I were on vacation this weekend. We were off at some baseball games and we were in a store and she said, you have got to buy the sign. And I was like, what sign are you talking about? And she brought me over to it and it says, dear brain, please shut up. And I thought, yep, I've got to buy that sign. I'm going to hang it where I can see it all the time because I feel like that is what I'm constantly wanting to say to my brain.
Yep. That's what it comes down to, people. Life coaching is conversing with your brain, understanding how it works and telling it to shut up. No, it's a little more than that, but really, yeah, you are not your brain.
Yeah, that's a piece that we don't know. Like we don't necessarily realize that we can actually have that conversation with our brain and say, hey, this is enough, or whatever it is we want to say, even if it's please shut up. You know, we actually can have that conversation and learn to direct our brain.
That's a huge part of coaching is you are separate from your brain. It is just spitting thoughts out at you all day long. It doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean anything, but it is influencing you in your life. But you can take charge of that.
Yeah, you can take charge and you get to choose whether or not you want to believe it. That's where our agency lies is very at that base minimum in our brain. Like we get to decide whether or not we're going to believe the things that our brain offers us.
Yes.
So I want to talk a little bit more about this ADHD, this topic of ADHD. Many people think that ADHD means that someone is unfocused or physically very active, but is that a myth? Is that reality? Let's hear a little bit about that.
Well, I'll tell you like the basics of what ADHD is. Okay. So yes, stereotypically people see it as a hyper little boy running around the classroom. And as a side note, someone may be listening who says, I don't have ADHD, I have ADD. And that used to kind of be different, but the correct diagnostic terminology is ADHD for everything now. So if you have ADD, you have ADHD because there's 3 subgroups, predominantly inattentive, predominantly hyperactive and impulsive, or 3, a combination. And I think a lot of people, I'm a combination of them. And it stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And put simply, I'm not a neurologist, I'm not a scientist. I'm just going to give basics today. That's what I'm focused on. But it's a neurodevelopmental disorder of the brain, mostly in the executive function of the brain. So in other words, the management system of your brain. Things like managing time, organization, coordination, prioritizing things on your list, maintaining routines, paying attention, switching focus from one thing to the next is very difficult, remembering details, planning and organizing, avoiding saying or doing the wrong thing, doing things based on your experience, multitasking, that's a lot. We have to manage everything in our lives, from our household to our self-care, to our jobs and callings and all of these things. The problem is that's the problem in an ADHD brain is the management system. So we have to do things differently. I think the other important thing to remember is that ADHD brains also have less dopamine. And I think
that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So and it is more complicated than that because sometimes it's like not being able to access it, but just for the sake of conversation, we don't have as much dopamine. And dopamine is what allows us to regulate our emotional responses. And it's what helps us take action to achieve specific rewards, right? And it's responsible for feelings of pleasure and reward. So think about the uncomfortable things for you, like maybe washing the dishes, doing laundry, going for a run, all of these things. You kind of have to work yourself up to do it, right? You have to find the motivation.
Mm-hmm.
You get a little hit and a reward and all these things. Those hits and those rewards are far harder for us to get. And so things are more of a challenge. We don't get that award as easily. And I don't say that as an excuse for whatever, but things,
right.
You don't get as much of a reward. And it also, because it regulates your emotional responses, you know, a woman with ADHD may go from like totally at peace to kind of yelling, or they feel like their nerves are exposed, and you could have a conversation with your spouse and it all of a sudden becomes emotional to you. Like you can't, and you're telling yourself to like remain calm, but you're worked up about it. And so it's frustrating. It can be really frustrating. And for those of you listening who have ADHD and they're saying that doesn't sound like me, just like any other disorder or any other condition is very unique to each person. So I recognize that and I see you. But so yeah, that's basically what it is. Our brain is literally different. That's all there is to it.
Well, first of all, I didn't necessarily realize that like those 3 subcategories of ADHD. I have differentiated between ADD and ADHD. And I think we, as a society, we have done that for a while. So you're saying that is a little bit, they're overarching.
It really isn't ADD anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
People will argue with me on that too. I'm like, just what the psychiatric community has decided, the official terminology, and any ADHD professional will tell you that. And you're still seeing, you're just some mix of those groups.
Okay.
And people will say, I'm not hyper, and maybe you're not in that group. But a lot of times for women, the hyperactivity is internal.
Mm-hmm. It's in your brain.
It's in your mind. And
I think it's important to note that as a life coach, like you're not going to be somebody who's diagnosing somebody with ADHD.
No.
The life coach doesn't do the diagnosing. That's reserved for a therapist. A therapist would be the person who would diagnose you or prescribe.
Or a psychiatrist or psychologist.
Yes.
Yeah. But I find that most women kind of self-diagnose, like they'll find a book or a list. You can research kind of the list of things that are signs. And oftentimes a woman is really innately, they'll say, that is me. So I would encourage people, and maybe I'll include a list to you guys for show notes, like of a couple books they could use. But yeah, just like you would go to a heart surgeon, have your heart fixed, someone trained specifically in ADHD, because even like not all psychiatrists, not all therapists, like it's still very much a very undiagnosed population, women with ADHD. So yeah, but you can trust yourself. And I coach people, you don't have to come to me and be like, I have an official ADHD diagnosis. You can say, oh, I think I do, or I just feel like I relate because my mind is busy. But no, I'm not going to diagnose. Right. And to be honest, to me, it's not super relevant in the way that we.
Right. It does. Nothing really changes, I'm sure, unless somebody is like seeking for medication or something like that. They're not going to come to you. I just wanted to point out that, if they're looking to be like clinically diagnosed, you're not the person that's going to do that. You can help them with so many of the symptoms and the different things, but it's not the diagnosis that you're going to make. So what I love, we're in this unique space where we get to kind of apply. We're at the crossroads of the life coaching tools and the gospel of Jesus Christ, and not just the gospel of Jesus Christ, but the culture of the gospel of people who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ. Do you see any struggles that people have specifically in the church that have ADHD?
Oh, very much. So, and sometimes I will talk about myself, not to put the spotlight on myself, but just because I feel like hopefully someone can relate to that. Right. Mm-hmm. So for me, coaching on ADHD is really important because I wasn't diagnosed until I was like 35.
Is that common? Is
it for women? Very much so.
Okay.
Because for instance, just for an example, I got straight A's. I was obedient. I was a little chatty. You would not have thought I had it.
Yeah.
Right. But inside, I was always anxious. My brain was always on. I was always worried about things. And for instance, like I would go to spend the night at someone's house and my brain wouldn't turn up. I literally could not fall asleep anywhere else but my own bed. And women often fly under the radar because of the way that those symptoms manifest. They're more internal versus external. There are girls and women that do have that hyperactivity. Mm-hmm. The girls that get diagnosed young tend to have some other comorbidity, meaning another issue along with it, like dyslexia. Like I have ADHD and depression. That's very, very common to have a couple of things going on. So if you're dyslexia, that's going to show up in school earlier, right? Here's the thing. ADHD people are typically very smart and creative. So if you're not showing these external signs, then you're flying under the radar because you're using your intellect and your creativity to compensate for the things that you're struggling with. It doesn't really become that big of a problem until the responsibility of life piles on and they become more. So for instance, I started really kind of noticing in high school that I did everything, sports, all this stuff. And then I would crash and I would miss like 3 days of school. It was just so overwhelming to me. Then I went to college and I had a roommate directly across from me. Her side was so tidy. It was like a frat boys room, my side. It was like insane.
I'm sure your roommate loved that.
She was really, really very forgiving and sweet. But I was social, I was having fun, but my room was a disaster. And same thing, the more responsibilities I had. And then I got married really young, which was totally the right thing for me. But then I'm not only managing my stuff, but parts of like paying bills and like all of these things. And then becoming a mother and managing callings and those expectations. And what happens is I would just keep trying to do things the way everybody else did. This is very common with women with ADHD. And it's like, you were like, what is wrong with me? This person's van, when they open that sliding door, there are not McDonald's wrappers coming out. like, come on. What is wrong with me that I cannot keep my van clean? I have piles of things everywhere and I am a smart, capable being. Why can I not do these mundane things? Why can I not be consistent? It becomes a part of you that something is wrong with you on a very deep subconscious level. And you keep trying to do things the way other people are. Okay, I'm going to try this schedule, or I'm going to use this planner, or I'm going to implement this neurotypical way of doing things. This time it's going to work. You ask anyone with ADHD how many planners they've bought in their lives and not used, easily like 10. Basically what it is, okay, breaking down, but then again, no, I can do this. I could be like them. Talking yourself up. It's like literally running at a brick wall, like just running at a brick. And what we don't realize is that those people don't have a brick wall. And if we just run harder and we work harder, we can just break through it. Here's my message. We may have a brick wall, ladies. We don't have to run at it. We just walk up to it and walk around it. There are solutions right in front of us. We just have to do it differently. And you can hire any organization specialist, because people always say, well, do you teach like organization and tips and tricks? And I do have some of those. None of that is going to work lasting unless you understand the thoughts you have about ADHD, the thoughts you have about yourself and your limitations and your beliefs. Nothing will last until you focus on that. And that's what's happened in my life. So
it takes some compassion too. It's not just saying, well, I'm not going to try that, or I'm just going to give up. It's like, it's not also then feeling some resentment or some anger and frustration for yourself that you're not doing it the quote unquote typical way. There has to be some compassion involved.
Yeah. And it's a very human thing to all of us. We think that if we just beat ourselves up, like, right, this time I'll do it. And it's just the irony that the more love you have for yourself and the more you're like, it really doesn't matter, the more likely you are to actually progress. But I got off track because you asked about how this affects women, and it's how it affects women in the church. And I do want to address that.
I would love that.
So when a woman with ADHD already is struggling to fit society's standards for them, imagine adding the culture of the church on top of that. If you tell me that you do not mesh the culture and the gospel in your life and you're a member of the church, I just don't believe you. We all do that to some degree. Mm-hmm. Heather, if I were to ask you, what do you think the stereotypical ideal LDS woman is? Not like that you actually believe that, but that culture kind of presents.
Yeah.
How do you answer that?
And I for sure, there was a day when when I did believe and buy into this, and I don't anymore. So this will be like what you said, the stereotypical, what most people believe. And right. I think this is what gets people in trouble, is like, it's somebody who just has everything put together. They get up early in the morning, they do all the things, their house is neat and organized, the kids are happy and fed and dressed well, and they have a good relationship with their spouse if they're married, and they do all the things. They can check all the boxes according to the things that we are told that we should and shouldn't do. And then they are able to go to bed early because they have all the things done. And They just put their heads on their pillow at night and they go to sleep without any worries or cares after they've said their prayers. And
right. And had family home evening consistently.
Yes.
And read their scriptures every day at the exact same time.
Yes. Yes. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. And I think most people will be nodding their heads. All those things you listed are what women with ADHD struggle with. So imagine, it's one thing for society to feel like you don't fit in there, but when it's mixed with religion, you don't only feel bad about yourself, you feel unworthy. I mean, cleanliness is next to godliness, right? Mornings are often hard for people with ADHD. I do not do things before 10 a.m. or 11 a.m., period, because I decide in my life, that's just what I don't do it. But before I would try, and I would make it about a week of going from morning till night, and then I would just crash.
Mm-hmm.
And
then be upset with yourself, probably because you didn't do it.
Oh yeah, I would get depressed.
Go again. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And overwhelmed. Overwhelm is a very real severe thing for women with ADHD. And the other thing is, what's interesting about the way that ADHD manifests in women is like when you're a little girl, they are more acceptable symptoms. So like if you're not paying attention, you're just spacey. You fly under the radar because they become a part of your personality and your character. Like she's chatty. She is late for everything. So she's inconsiderate. She's messy. So she's lazy. So now you're a lazy, inconsiderate, spacey, chatty person. And that is from the time you're young, that's just deep. And then on top of it, you struggle to read your scriptures every day or at the same time. Or like I said, it's just running into that brick wall, and it affects your relationship to your heavenly parents. It affects the way that you feel the spirit. It affects everything. And that is why it's so important to me. We really need to wake up and understand that whether you have ADHD or not, we need to know our own brains, exactly what our challenges are, exactly what our strengths are. Forget about everybody else and say, I know my brain super well. I know my gifts. I know my strengths. I'm going to use my strengths to creatively work around my challenges. I'm going to find solutions. I don't care what anybody else does. That's what God would want me to do.
Yeah, for sure. Some people are like, they will think, well, if I just accept this, then, if I just am saying, well, I'm ADHD, so I can't do that or whatever. Some people will say, well, you're just using it as a cop out or whatever in your life. Yep. And I really see that being very different. Having and being able to say, yeah, this is what I have, actually gives you some control over it and some power to think a little bit differently about it rather than just being upset.
And what often happens is when you get that diagnosis, you feel really validated. And then later you have different thoughts about it, limiting beliefs like, okay, well, I had some relief, but now I have ADHD and I'm defeated. I'm never going to have what I want in life. And that's a huge part of coaching. And another one is like, what are the thoughts that you have about your diagnosis? What do you actually believe about it? And one time someone asked me an interesting question. They said, Jody, if I had a magic wand and I could just take away your ADHD, but it would also take away the other positive components of it, would you agree? And I didn't have to hesitate. I was like, heck no, because it's my superpower.
Yeah, I want to hear about the superpower parts for you and for people that your clients. I think that is so important to
totally. For me, it looks kind of like my house is messy. I don't think I've ever in my life had every room in my house remotely like organized at the same time, ever.
Yeah. So what, right?
Right. And you have to get really, really good at not caring what people think. That's another huge part of coaching. But okay, as far as my superpowers, I can get up and speak in front of a huge crowd and I don't get nervous at all. Not at all. But you know what? My house isn't clean, so I'm not worthy. I'm very creative and artistic. And you'll often find that people with ADHD are very open and loving and friendly, and you just want to be around them because they're very expressive and yeah, just kind of fun. It's not hard for me to tell someone I love them. It's not hard for me to just talk to anybody. I can't think of anything, how Christ-like is that to be able to approach anyone in any station of life and be like, hey, I love you. I can see all these good things in you. My house is messy, but come in anyway. I'm over letting that keep people from me. Come in anyway and tell me, you know what? That's like the least interesting thing about me is my home. Like the way the mess is. Let's have a hilarious conversation. Let's talk about something deep. Let's go do something or nothing at all. I'm not interested in what your car or your home looks like. I'm interested in you. I wouldn't trade that for anything. And I do really struggle with things about ADHD.
Yeah, that is such a gift and such an important thing to spend your time focusing on, right? We have these things that we don't like about us, whether we have ADHD or not.
Yes.
But we tend to not give the same amount of airtime to thinking about the things that we love about ourselves as well. We just have a really strong tendency to dwell on the things that we don't like.
Right. We're always searching for this next level of ability or to achieve something new or to progress. But I'm telling you, whether you have ADHD or not, until you learn to track all the amazing things that you do, you won't have that power. But as soon as you do, it happens pretty quickly. Like, well, yeah, I'm pretty remarkable. I love when women come to me and they're like, I just feel so like unaccomplished. I'm like, okay, how many babies have you had? Like, you're done. Anything else is just bonus here, friends.
Yes.
Like, I was coaching a client recently and she's pregnant and working full time. And she's just like, I feel like such a loser. I come home and I'm just on Instagram. I'm like, yeah, you're a real loser. Being pregnant and working full time, you're growing a human. Psh. We need to rethink things. And LDS women and religious women in general, and even people that aren't, they feel like that's bragging or selfish to be like, here are all the good things about me. I can't think of a more selfless thing than to know your own power, because that's when you're going to be able to make an impact on the people around you.
You know, saying the things about us, the things that we love about us is so amazing and so powerful. Where we can get in trouble with that. And this is the part that people often misinterpret, is they think that they are saying they are better than somebody else when they say those things.
Yes, which is a moral flaw, right?
Yes, which is a moral flaw. And is also not true, right? If you are, you're going to know, because it's not going to feel good to say that. But if you're just really saying, I'm so good at this, and it's not to raise yourself up above anybody else, it's just to love yourself, there's a huge difference there.
Right. And the interesting thing is that you don't need to gain more power. You need to understand the power you already have access to.
Yeah.
And my son, we were driving in the car the other day and he said, Mom, how many meals do you think that you've cooked for us? It was 10,000 on average so far in my kids' lives. 10,000 meals. Holy moly. That's awesome. Women are awesome. People are just awesome. How many times have you said, I love you to your kids? And what stability is that providing? We have got to get down and tell our brain to like, shut up and take it and turn it like a head and say, no. Look at all this.
Yeah. Now I feel like I need to know how many meals I've prepared.
Oh, calculate it.
Because hearing you say that, I was like, holy cow.
And for other people,
I love you. And it's not even saying the I love you, but it's the willingness to say I love you without anybody saying it back to you.
Yes.
That's the story of my life. I feel like with some of my people, like I've said it so many times,
Yes.
but I don't get anything in return. And it's okay. Like I say it because I mean it and it feels good.
You mean it.
Yeah.
And how do we measure the way what that gives to someone's stability and foundation in life for our kids or for anyone, right? And this is where we find our power. And I don't care who you are. I really, really want to ask women to be better about judging people's homes, judging their messiness, judging someone being late, doing all these things. Can we just focus on what matters?
Yeah.
And it's hard. We all judge to some degree, right? Yeah. But I read something the other day and it was kind of like when you have your first innate response to something is kind of like the natural man. And then it's what you do with that thought afterwards is who you are currently. For instance, if you walk into someone's house and you judge them for it, that may make sense because we all want to fit in and we want people to be like us. But then what do you do with that judgment next? You say, oh, be quiet, brain. I'm not here for them. I love this person. These people are amazing.
I am actually really glad you bring that up because I know personally that sometimes my brain has a tendency to, and I wish that it didn't, but to notice the things that are maybe not the ideal, in somebody else. And I can be really quick to just jump on the train of, oh, there's something so wrong with you because you always go there. And if you could just get it right, if you could just be more like Christ, you wouldn't even have seen that in the first place.
Yes.
And that's not true. Like we are going to notice things, but it doesn't mean anything about us. If we just, it's like, oh, I noticed that. No big deal.
Yes, exactly. And that's why another part of coaching is really understanding that animal part of your brain. It makes sense that we do that. There's a very like herd mentality, or like we want everyone to be the same for some reason. And it's just a very innate thing. So you shouldn't judge yourself for that. In fact, like one of my favorite thoughts to offer my clients is don't necessarily go from like, especially when you're judging yourself for thinking a thought or judging yourself for judging or something like that. One way to interrupt that is to just be like, no, it makes sense. It makes sense that I'm thinking that. Not like I love myself for thinking that, or I hate myself for thinking that, but like scientifically, from a curious human scientific perspective, it makes sense. And that kind of takes away the struggle there. So that's one of my favorite thoughts is it makes sense.
All right. As we start winding it up here, Jody, I always just like to know if there's anything that is just on your mind that you feel like you want the listeners to hear or to know or to understand.
Yeah. The more that I come to care less about what people think and really focus on my specific brain and what my gifts and my challenges are, the better I am at curating a life that's perfect for me. And the more that I do that, the more I tap into my spiritual zone of genius, the more fulfilled I feel because I'm living that purpose. But we have to untangle the conditioning and all of these things first. But my message is that it's not just possible, it is inevitable if you're willing to do the work. You can change your beliefs. And a lot of women with ADHD or who are struggling with something, they don't feel like they fit the mold of the ideal woman. I want to tell you there isn't one. It's all made up. It's all a lie. And we get to create what that is for ourselves. And it's not just lip service, me saying that. I know because I implement that in my own life. And I've never felt closer to God or to the spirit when I'm trying to be me.
I love the word you used, curate, so much, because for me, when I think of somebody who's a curator, I think of somebody who is curated a display or something at a museum, right? Or an art gallery, and they have intentionally placed certain things in certain places in their museum or their art gallery to convey a certain feeling, to accomplish a certain thing.
Yes.
And that is exactly what we are. We're the curators of our life. We need to stop letting other people be in charge of where we hang things or what we think about a certain piece of art, if you want to look at it in terms of that way. And we're the ones that get to intentionally place all these things in our story and create what we want to create. And it's about time that we started doing that on purpose.
Yeah. And what's interesting about the whole art aspect is like, you're going to curate something. And my minor was art history, so I'm always thinking about art. But like, if you go to an art show and you look at an abstract piece of art, and there's 3 people standing there looking at it, one's going to be moved by it. One's going to be like, my 2-year-old could do that, right? Mm-hmm. And it only matters that you like it. You curate it to have the best human experience possible for you. And please stop running at that brick wall. Let's get curious. When all of your energy is going to, this is what's wrong with me, that's what your brain is going to focus on. And there's no room for, wait, these are all my amazing abilities that I can use to overcome these. And just as one final example, it's like, for me, I kept beating myself up about not maintaining my home. Well, I switched gears and made my focus to earn money to pay someone. And now I have these wonderful ladies who feel like family that come into my house and clean for me. And I'm like, that was really smart of me. That is not a moral flaw. That is like, I couldn't access that because I thought that there's something wrong with me. Those are the kind of things, the shifts that we do in coaching.
So good and so important and such a needed message. I'm so glad that people have you to look to and listen to and grow from. So thank you for sharing yourself with us. I so appreciate it. Before we leave, can you tell us where people can find more of you?
Yes, you can visit jodylong.com and you can click on the freebies at the top menu. And I'm going to have an ADHD freebie and some other ones that you can access just for fun. And you can click the work with me to learn more about my coaching style and to book a free discovery call. And I always tell people it's so important to do that because the connection that you have with someone is important. And even if someone doesn't decide to work with me, it's like a pep talk.
Yeah.
And we just come away better from it. So jodylong.com. I'm on Instagram at Jody Long Coaching, Facebook, Jody Long Coaching. And the link in my bio and Instagram also has links to everything. So
awesome. We will link to all of those in our show notes too.
awesome.
Thank you so much for being here. I have found it so fascinating and so thought-provoking. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for providing the opportunity for all of us, Heather. That's awesome.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time. Hey, we just wanted to thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Latter-day Life Coaches and being part of this conversation. Share this with your friends so that you can have a conversation with them on this topic as well. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Have a good one, my friends.